Hi there, Victor Prost, anarchist artist, speaking to you. Today, I would like to talk about Ayn Rand, which is a hot button topic with many people and different circles. But there you go. Today, I'm going to talk basically about her idea of government, what the government is about, its proper functions, and as we all know that Rand was a minarchist, not necessarily a libertarian. She scorned and turned away from any designations of being a libertarian, but she was, without getting into a big quagmire of semantic titles, she was a minarchist or a small government advocate. So basically, I'm just going to read her statements, her writings, and just some cherry picking on some quotes from her in regards to her whole approach to government. Not in such a way as to misrepresent her. I'm not going to cherry pick those type of statements to mislead or misrepresent or to self-serve cherry pick, so to speak. I'm just going to read excerpts that's taken from the Ayn Rand lexicon. So whatever I'm reading from has been selected by the ARI, the Ayn Rand Institute. So and Harry Binswanger, who put together the book, the Ayn Rand lexicon. So I'm just dealing with her arguments, okay? And what I have to say in regards to Rand's definition and ideas and purpose and function of government basically does speak to encapsulate the general ideas of libertarians, or insofar as government does have a purpose for human beings, that there is a function for the government. So that basically it's one broad sweep that I'll be taking care of Rand's arguments, and also just to generally speak to the whole idea of limited government for those who advocate it and who may very well or may not very well be familiar with Rand's writings, but do see that there is a purpose for government. And I've surveyed all those different reasons and arguments, and they're all very similar. They basically can be encapsulated in such a way as all being very simpatico in their approach. So whoever the writer is for small governments. But let's just deal with Rand. Okay, so just kind of plowing right into it here. A government is an institution that holds the exclusive power to enforce certain rules of social conduct in a given geographical area. If physical force is to be barred from social relationships, men need an institution charged with the task of protecting their rights under an objective code of rules. This is the task of government, of a proper government, proper in italics. Make no mistake, you see. Proper government. Its basic task, its only moral justification, and the reason why men do need a government. Okay, now a government is the means of placing retaliatory the retaliatory use of physical force under objective control, i.e., under objectively defined laws. Okay, so basically that's why we need a government. People will exert force against others. They will attempt to rob and cheat, and so you need a government to keep that ill-behaved code of conduct under check and censure. And then there's also the case of just fraud, and doesn't necessarily entail direct force. And then there's also the case of honest contractual disputes or breaches and things like that. So the government acts as a kind of impartial arbiter. So it's because due to immorality and irrationality and honest disputes that we have an impartial arbiter. That is the proper function of government. And the anarchist, by the way, does not dispute the fact that we have this social problem. It's not like, once again, I've stressed 100,000 times, I'm not going to go into it here, that of course it's not some kind of morally purified, beatific angels flying all over the place, eating grapes from trees and and living off the land and kumbaya and singing campfire songs, and nobody ever uses force against each other, and we all have to be on the same page, accepting the non-aggression principle. So long as one person advocates or exerts force, there goes the whole system, the whole anarchist system. We realize, of course, that human beings have the capacity for evil and corruption, but in acknowledging that, that is not an argument for government. We come from the position that's an argument against government, but we'll get to that as I move along here. Okay, now the only proper purpose of a government is to protect man's rights, which means to protect him from physical violence, as I was just touching on. A proper government is only a policeman acting as an agent of man's self-defense, and as such may resort to force only to those who start the use of force. The only proper function of a government are the police, to protect you from criminals, the army, to protect you from foreign invaders, and the courts, to protect your property and contracts from breach or fraud by others, to settle disputes by rational rules according to objective laws. But a government that initiates the employment of force against men who had forced no one, the employment of armed compulsion against disarmed victims, is a nightmare, infernal machine designed to annihilate morality. Such a government reverses its only moral purpose and switching from the role of protector to the role of man's deadliest enemy, from the role of policeman to the role of a criminal, vested with the right to the wielding of violence against victims deprived of the right of self-defense. So now we can see here that no private citizen could possibly impose the large-scale destruction and death and devastation, not corporations, not private individual citizens, could possibly reach the mammoth, gargantuan, leviathan level of destruction that governments are capable of. But Rand tells us that the function of government is to protect us from physical harm. But they are morally charged with this all-encompassing responsibility, this enormous responsibility of protecting us by the use of by having a monopoly on the use of force, of physical force. I mean, and you talk about utopian. I mean, anarchists are charged with being utopian. Yeah, but we're gonna handle a small cadre, an aggregate of people, a relatively small group of people, given the population of whoever makes up government, makes up the ruling elite, the lawmakers, the Congress, the president, the politicians, special lobbyists, or whatever that is composed of government. The people who are composed of government, the upper echelons of the ruling elite, are going to be entrusted with this kind of power, and this is not utopian? I mean, it's ridiculous. It flies in the face of historical fact. But just to continue on, the source of the government's authority is the consent of the governed. Now, is the consent of the governed. Now, this just kills me. This just absolutely floors me. This is prototypical standard garden variety small government advocate flim-flam, and it's coming from a otherwise fairly brilliant philosopher. I mean, it just boggles the mind. The source of the government's authority is the consent of the government. Well, the argument goes, of course, is the anarchist or the voluntarist, or maybe of some other kind of philosophical stripe, who might very well just stop and ask, whoa, 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 where's my signature? That's the typical, argument that you'll come across. This is like the consent of the governed? Governed? I mean, where's my signature on this contract? I didn't sign it. But the whole idea of this, this is where we get into that bullshit about the social contract. The social contract and the consent of the governed is basically touches on the same point, in that You're born into a geographical area that's ruled by a certain government that has its laws in place, and by being born into that geographical area and growing into adulthood and interacting and trading and cooperating with others, that you implicitly consent to that specific government's dictates and rules by the fact of existing and living there. That's where you get the whole love it or leave it argument too as well. But this is just fraught with so many problems. I don't even know where to begin. First of all, there is the issue of property rights. I mean, a government has been charged with the task of protecting individual rights, which includes property rights, but it does so by taxation, by theft, and by allotting to itself that the government, the people who are in government, are the owners of the entire geographical area that country's where that country is. I mean, how did they acquire it? And this is the problem with a lot of anarcho-communists or communists or whoever advances the argument that property rights is theft. They're have their eyes really unfocused on what the government's doing, and then they just think that, oh well, that's property rights for you. There, it's government takeover of a certain geographical area, and they think that they own all the resources of that basic area, including the human beings. So, and they look at the predations and the bloodshed of government in acquiring this power over people in a certain area, and then they go, so all property is property rights, and property as such is theft, which is just a ridiculous, massive equivocation of the greatest intellectual dishonesty. But I guess I've said enough for now. I'm going to get back to this a little bit more in a second video and touch on the ideas of Ayn Rand when it comes to government and just basic small government advocates. Which is just completely fraught with contradictions and problems. And if you're at all interested in this like I am, then come back for the second video. I thank you for listening to this one. Victor Pross, anarchist artist, signing out. Pop goes the culture.